Well, first of all, like Sean, I'd like to say how great it is for me to come back home to Portlaoise, the place where I was brought up. It's always a real pleasure to be here in the town and to pass by the church where you were. Got your first Holy Communion and your confirmation and the school you went to. It's always a very nostalgic trip. I think particularly, at a time when, obviously when my parents were alive, I was here on a regular basis. And now that, they have gone, it's only, opportunities like this that kind of bring you back to Portlaoise. And it's also great to have been invited. It is a real honour for me to have been invited here today to speak on the theme of property, its rights and its duties, particularly with my distinguished fellow speakers. Lalor, an impassioned and articulate activist. He campaigned for major change in the social order and for the rights of tenants to greater control of their land and the duty of the state and the landlords to enable this to take place. So we've come a long way since then. And nevertheless, the issue, though broadened into the wider question now of wealth distribution, is still very relevant. So I'm not a politician and I'm not a political scientist and I'm not a radical campaigner either, but I do recognise these difficult economic times, the centrality of this issue in the life of the nation. The question of fairness in the distribution of the harvest of the Celtic tiger, and then the fairness or not in the spread of pain that has been a feature of the subsequent recession. And then, again, the even-handedness in using the fruits of the incipient recovery. So this is an issue of acute current relevance, and which has spontaneously prompted the kind of mass demonstrations that were very much a feature of Lalor's time. I mean, if you think of even last Saturday, over 50,000 people were on the streets of Dublin campaigning against the water rates, and it's not the first time there have been many of those. So I'm sure my fellow panellists will speak with knowledge and expertise on the issue of deprivation and hardship in our country today and how that can be ameliorated. But I like to add my small voice and make a plea for a constituency for which I'm familiar and which I know has suffered at least as much, if not more, than the rest of Irish society, and which I fear is all too easy to forget. I'm talking about the arts. Now, I know that part of the discussion this morning was led into the arts, as did last night's discussion. It's amazing, when we go around this roundabout, it always ends up with the arts. I'm talking about the arts community. It's a fact that society at large find it hard to believe that artists, the people who are lauded in the media for their novels, their play, their performing virtuosity, who win awards and nationally and internationally, that these people are in any way impoverished or deserve special consideration. Well, a very, very small percentage of the successful artists are probably doing okay. But the majority of artists live lives that are much less glamorous and much less rewarded. So I'm first of all going to speak about our most distinguished artists, the members of Éastóna, the writers, the painters, the musicians, etc., who are considered to be our foremost artists. There are 250 of them. That's the maximum. They always put a ceiling on it. 165 of them claim the Canoes. This is a stipend of €17,000 euro a year that's given by the state to artists who are members of Éastóna and who are earning less than 26,000. So even if they're at the top level of 26,000, they get not much more than the minimum wage. And we're talking here about household names. We're talking about the people that are quoted regularly by the media, who feature in our national efforts to promote cultural tourism and to attract inward investment. Brendan spoke earlier, I just heard the end of it, about the politicians and how they quote from Kennedy, but right through to the present day. They quote our poets and our writers when they're going over to visit Obama, etc., on St. Patrick's Day. What do they come under their arm? A poetry book or a novel by somebody who is probably living on the breadline. To be a member of Éisteanna, an artist has to achieve, first of all, a high level of recognition from their peers. They're the people who decide who's going to be a member. But they would also have been recognised both nationally and internationally. But that's Éisteanna. They're our top artists in the country. But we also have a wider community of hard-working and talented artists whose work is part of our rich tapestry, the work that fills our hearts and nourishes our souls. How do they survive? Well, I'm going to share with you some salient facts from a most comprehensive study for a generation that was carried out by the Arts Council and the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. It shed critical new light on what it means to be an artist in this country, a writer, a musician, a painter, a performer in modern-day Ireland. The average professional artist in the Republic of Ireland earns €14,500 a year from their art. The study shows that that artists are exceptionally highly educated. In the group interviewed, more than 2/3 of them had a minimum of a university degree. They also put in more than 55 hours a week into their creative endeavours. These are people who didn't benefit from the Celtic Tiger. They didn't have bonuses or pension plans or company cars. In fact, for many of them, the Celtic Tiger just completely passed them by. But they're also people who have to feed their families, to pay their rent, to get the school fees, and just do the same as every other working person. So what I want to say to you today is just to ask yourself the question of how poor we'd be if we didn't have the arts, how poor we'd be if we couldn't go into our bookshop and buy a good novel, or even get it from Amazon on our Kindle, or switch on the radio and hear good music, listen to poetry, plays, paintings, look at that wonderful exhibition upstairs. Ireland would be a cultural desert. So what am I asking for? I'm asking for a stronger realisation at government level and among the people of property, for the institutions of wealth, of the vital importance of the arts to the life and soul of the nation, and a recognition that it needs serious financial support. Government funds to the Arts Council in the past 5 years have dropped by 1/3. And I heard a speaker in the audience mention the fact that last week, when the government did have an extra few bob to sprinkle, the Arts Council and all of the cultural institutions were left on standstill money. So this has to be reversed immediately. And the resurgence of profits in companies, I think that this should enable enlightened and conscientious decision makers in corporate Ireland to extend further support to the art. And the subject this morning is about property. And I mean, it all relates to the same thing. If you just look at your wonderful surroundings here in the Donaghmase Arts Centre. Just to take a look at this, Ireland now has a network of about 70 theatres and art centres throughout the country. Most of them were built when money was more freely available, many of them built at the beginning of the Celtic Tiger. But funding from the Arts Council has reduced by 40% to these venues over the last 5 years. And many of them are also funded by the County Council. They're jointly funded, and of course the County Council's money has reduced significantly as well. I don't have the figures to hand. But they all still have to be maintained. They still need to be programmed. Some of the venues had to close their doors for part of the year because they can't afford to switch on the light. So that's where it is. So more money for the arts would mean that theatres and art centres around the country would get back to being vibrant artistic hubs, providing abundance and diversity of arts for the audiences, and at the same time giving work to artists and performers in order to give them a more solid base and to help them with their existence. Now, there'll be no handouts, but increased funding would allow greater stimulus, more earning opportunities, and a fairer reward for artists across all art forms. We have to take greater care of these people who endure straitened lifestyles to enrich our lives with their work. It is their right and our duty. Thank you.